Hello again everybody. It's actually warmed up a little bit here and it's a sort of lighter shade of grey today. Summer must be here. I thought I'd take a little bit of time out. I've touched on this subject in some of my other videos from time to time, but I don't think I've ever made a video actually dedicated to the subject. So today I thought I'd put that right while I could get a few of these outside without them getting a good dousing. And the subject I'm going to be covering today is bad bikes. Now we've all heard of various machines that, ooh, they're nothing but trouble, them, or you don't want to buy one of them, avoid them like the plague. Oh, my uncle had one of them, it was always breaking down. Well, I think I've got a few of the culprits behind me here, and we're just going to touch lightly on the subject and discuss some of their individual faults and whether they actually are faults or not. Some of them, obviously, some of the stories, the horror stories about some of them have obviously got some foundations, some more than others, and others are just borderline wives' tales really. But let's have a look at what we've got here. Now, first off, in no particular order of age or make or anything else, here we go. We've got the Royal Enfield 500 Electra X. They didn't make that for terribly long, and lots of people would probably say no wonder. Unfortunately, these could have been a very good bike, and to be fair to them, they can ride and perform very well. Certainly far more lively than the Bullets that preceded them. The only problem with them was really, the major one then, was that you could get early failure of the big ends, and I've read and understood that the tempering of the crank pins in some of the earlier ones wasn't quite up to scratch, and I've known of failures within 5,000 miles, but then I've also tuned up, increased and nearly doubled the power of some machines that have covered nearly 20,000 miles, and they've gone on to do at least another 10,000 miles that I've known of, and perhaps are still going strong for all I know. So a bit of pot luck with these. I suppose the later you get the better, or if one's been rebuilt with a new crank pin, then you should have a pretty good reliable bike. But because of that, that sort of stigma of the big ends, they never fetched much money and they never had much of a following, and they weren't made for very long. There's also, to compound that, you've got the dreaded electric start sprag clutch issues. Now they are not old wives' tales, they also happen, but you can get a good one, and because of all the sort of horror stories and the degree of truth in a lot of them, you can pick one of these machines up quite often at a reasonable price. So not to be scratched completely off the list if you're looking for something that will give you the sort of feeling of a classic motorbike and perform quite well, and you can buy it for reasonable money. So that's your Royal Enfield Electra X. Now then, I've owned this bike since 1983, and together we've covered around 60,000 miles. It had 10,000 miles on the clock when I bought it, and promptly spat its cam chain idler sprocket out through the front there between the cylinders, and needed a total strip down to attend to that. Now they have got a weak area there obviously, but if you do the maintenance correctly and keep the cam chain tensioned as it should be, you're far less likely to get that problem. This one was a rattler and a clatterer when I bought it, and I didn't know much about them. I knew more about British bikes and thought that sounds okay to me. Unfortunately, it was all the whip and backlash in the slack cam chain that ripped the idler sprockets for the cam chain down off their mounting, and then a sprocket merrily cut its way through the front of the cylinder barrels there. I didn't know anything about it until my oily feet were slipping off the oily footrests with all the oil that had come out. So what can we say about that? A Honda. Now it's not the only Honda that's ever had faults. There was the early VF 750 FD, the early CX 500s had weak big ends. So The Japanese can also be guilty to a point, but again, you maintain these things properly, even the sort of mechanically, shall we say, compromised ones, such as this, can be okay. And I've done great mileages on this, high speeds, fully loaded up, 2 up, loads of camping gear and everything. It's very economical to run, it's enjoyable to ride, but you hear the stories and believe them, it's a bad bike. So there's 2 bad bikes that we should supposedly avoid, and just for the record, 62,745 miles on that, and I probably did about 10,000 miles on it with a broken speedometer cable years ago, so I'm claiming 60,000 of those miles are my own. That should be showing about 72,000 in total from new. What's this awful bike we've got here? The BSA A65. You wouldn't even get up to the corner shop in the village without the time inside bush wearing out on one of these, would you? According to the stories, that is. But then, some of these rack up huge mileages with no problems at all. And a lot of that is down to care and maintenance and oil changes. Now, I've already discussed in a couple of my videos that I consider the oil tank to be part of the engine, and it's amazing how many oil tanks on these British and other bikes that have oil tanks, how the oil tanks are allowed to gather all sorts of gunge and crap in the bottom ready to be sucked into the engine after you've changed the oil for nice clean new stuff, and then that works its way merrily along through the oil pump, through the time inside bush and into the crank, and fills up the sludge trap, and then we might have a seizure. Oh god, it's a bad bike. Maintenance is the key here, and you'll go far and for a long time if you stick to the maintenance as you should. So again, I would say rather than being a bad bike, there are aspects of it, like on the Honda, that if they're not looked after and attended to when they should be, then you will get trouble. But if you treat them as they're intended to be treated and look after them, I don't confuse that with nursing them. Care and looking after and maintenance, not necessarily nursing them. And they can last a lot longer than others that aren't looked after properly. And I think that's the key to a lot of these bad machines. Someone mistreats them, then gets all upset about it when they let them down. Then they go down the pub, oh, the BSA A65's a load of crap, the Honda CB500T, oh, avoid that like the plague, and of course the Electra X. But we're not finished yet. Oh, the dreaded Triumph Tiger Cub. Now that one wouldn't get up to the end of the lane without the big end knocking itself out, would it? And yet, I've got loads and loads of footage on YouTube of me riding this machine, and well, borderline abusing it actually, especially on our off-road adventures. And I look after it well, I maintain it well. It's not polished or pampered, but I look after it. I change the oil when I'm supposed to, I keep everything mechanically spot on, and you know what it rewards me with? Good, reliable service, trouble-free. Now we come to this. This is the bike that actually inspired me to make this video while it's here, although I've got one of my own, and I'm going to come to that in a moment. Now, you only have to check out my playlist for Norton Navigator to see all the things that I had to attend to with this one. But again, you can't really blame the bike for what I found, apart from the bad design of the selector mechanism and the gearbox, which, to be fair, obviously was updated and revamped at some point before production finished. But this is an early example that's got a gearbox that obviously the manufacturers acknowledged there was a fault and they redesigned it, so hats off to them for doing that. But the Norton Navigator, again, and perhaps more thanks to the 250 Jubilee sibling that sort of preceded it, what a terrible reputation these have got. And I can only go by my short time with this one. I only took it out for a ride the once, where it impressed me, but I do remember the one that my father used to own, which I bought off him and I ought to do up one day. I remember him commuting on that a couple of days a week from where we used to live, which is further away from Cardiff than I am, so probably nearly 70 miles each way. He commuted to Cardiff a couple of times a week on his Navigator, often picking a friend up 10 miles from home to give him a lift on the back of it, and they go over the mountains and over to Merthyr Tydfil and down through the valleys and into Cardiff. They're 2 or 3 days a week. They were both studying at college, and as far as I know, the bike never let him down. He didn't use it all the time. Occasionally they used cars and they took it in turns to give each other lifts in, but that Navigator racked up a fair, probably a few thousand miles doing that run, I would say, over a couple of years that my father was doing it, and it never let him down. And I can remember going on the back of it as a schoolboy, and I'm pretty sure it managed to get up to around 75 or 80 miles an hour without too much trouble or effort with me on the back of the thing, although I suppose I would have been about 12 or 13 years old then, so not as bulky and heavy as I am now, but it performed really well. And I would challenge anyone who thinks that they've got a Triumph 350 twin, even in Tiger 90 form, to try and stay with one of these, because these perform really well. And obviously they handle great. You've got the road holder front end, and good all-round bike. And all of these, none of them should really be overlooked. None of them are what you'd call bad bikes.